Hello and welcome to The Week in Stupid. We start this week with the news that a Islamist was caught working for the German Internal Intelligence Service. The 51-year-old Islamist was apparently planning a bomb attack against the Internal Intelligence Center in Cologne. And he was not alone, but regularly talked about his ideas on online platforms with another Islamist who apparently also works for the intelligence service. The 51-year-old has been arrested. I don't know about what happened to the other one at this time. Of course, the first reaction by most would be to ask questions over how it is possible that this person got a job there in the first place, but I would like to take a moment to remind everyone over how good it is that this person was caught in the first place. How many terror attacks have been prevented in this country over the past year? Probably more than 8. The fact that we have so far had comparably smaller terror attacks, at least when compared to what happened in Belgium and France, does make me hopeful for the reliability of our security services. It is almost a miracle that we have so far not had a massive terror attack like in France, and as I said before, this arrest as well as the prevented attacks speak volumes for the good work of our security services. But there is a fact that we can't lose out of our sights here, which is that the security debate is far ahead of the social debate. Let me show you what I mean with that. Over the last 12 months, meaning between November of 2015 and November of 2016, the total number of victims by Islamic terror attacks throughout Europe have been 192 people killed and 752 people injured. The total number of victims of right-wing terror attacks in Europe between November 2015 and November 2016 have been 3 people injured. You can look those numbers up yourself in the Global Terror Database or even just on Wikipedia. Security authorities confronted with these numbers know exactly where priorities have to be put and where most work will have to be done because they don't have to carry the weight of the political pundits on their shoulders and only have to concern themselves with their main task, which is the security of society. The social debate, however, is dominated by wealthy brats who write whimpering articles about how evil old white men supposedly are, as well as Islam apologists and so-called moderate Muslims who constantly keep up the narrative that despite all the problems we have been facing over the past decades with Islam, it isn't Islam, but we, with our democracy, separation of religion and state, human rights, and even the color of our skin and gender, who are the real monsters in this world. Through the social debate lagging so far behind the security priorities, 2 dangerous problems arise. While society lags behind in confronting or even just debating the problem at hand, the security apparatus will continue to further build up to confront the actual real problem. But because society refuses to confront the problem and lags behind in its priorities, thereby not confronting Islam, the ideological nourishing ground for these Islamic terror attacks is not attacked. The result of this is that the Islamic terror threat is not reduced, and consequently the security apparatus is further expanded. This vicious cycle, created through political correctness and a refusal to confront Islam, will lead to the Islamic terror threat rising, whilst parallel to that, furthering the militarization of society and the build-up of a surveillance state. You can observe this in a later state in France, where civil militias have by now been established and questionable legal measures are being used to confront the problem. At the very least, the political correctness culture has been ended within France, as even the French left has started to confront Islam for its undemocratic nature and tendency towards violence. The price that was paid for that, however, were several hundreds dead, the creation of a hostile and self-segregated Islamic parallel society, and the Jewish community that is fleeing the country en masse due to the widespread and violent Islamic anti-Semitism. If we here in Germany want to avoid such a scenario for ourselves, then the most important step to take will be to get the priorities of the social debate right again, by moving Islam into the center of the discussion as the originator of these problems and to confront it, instead of leaving a bunch of lunatics and those who make apologetics for people who burn books and human beings in charge of the national debate. And now let's dictate a moment to our favourite whiny cunt, Stokowski, who this week again launched one of her brain farts into orbit through Der Spiegel. Learn what rape is. A study conducted by the European Commission lately came to the surprising result that a quarter of all German women believe that rape is sometimes okay. Everyone reading this will scratch themselves on the head and think that something must be very wrong here, and for good reason, because in the end it turns out that the question asked to the participants in the study were formulated in a far too vague and stupid way. Now, every normal person who hears of that will say, well, that's your own fault. Best, next time, try to ask more clear questions. Except, of course, Stokowski. After everything that was written about the Gina-Lisa Lohnfink case, it is probable that all three involved, the two men and Gina-Lisa Lohnfink, were not aware during the crime what the educated definition of rape is. That, of course, is no excuse for the crime, but it also doesn't make clarification easier. It is a problem that it isn't common to learn in school or from parents what rape is. It is a problem for women and men. Most of you won't know about this. The Gina-Lisa Lohnfink case was a case of a fake rape accusation that went through the German courts this year. A B-list celebrity it-girl had sex with two men, of which one filmed it and uploaded the clip to the internet without the permission of the other two. He, of course, got into trouble with the law for this. She, however, then claimed that they drugged her and raped her, something which was proven by investigations to be untrue, and during a following trial she was found guilty and sentenced for false rape accusations. The fact that Stokowski uses this clear-cut case, claims that it was still rape despite the ruling of the court and investigation, just shows you everything you really need to know. A deliberate ignoring of reality for the purpose of driving her agenda, in which she ignores the conclusions reached by a judge, experts and investigators to declare to all of you what true rape really is, because through the power of feminism, she has the authority to stand above all and disseminate to all of you. Rape doesn't simply happen because so many people are evil or driven to it. They happen because people step over the boundaries of other people, and they sometimes do that without even realizing it, or believing that they have permission to do so because they have a right to it, which they bought through a pre-story of paying for dinner, drinks, and bringing her home. According to actual credible studies on this matter, the main motivations that drive a rapist are sadism, power dynamic, and anger. Confronted with the initial definition by Stokowski, the first thought is that this fits here, but Stokowski chooses to expand her definition of rape in accordance to her ideological dogmas to include sex with regrets. Every person will at one point during their lives make a bad choice about sex and have a bad sexual experience at some point in life. Experiences that make you think, oh, I shouldn't have had sex with that person, or I actually was far too drunk to have sex in this situation. I would have rather not just done that in bed because it was really uncomfortable. I will never have sex with that person again. Every one of us has experiences of regretting a sexual experience. Every one of us regrets having had sex with a certain person. And every one of us has had sex with a person who then disgusted us or who we hated afterwards, or possibly even before. Those are not crimes, but experiences which are part of life, because these experiences contribute to shaping and discovering one's own sexuality. And every single one of us has at one point done something in bed which we didn't want to do, or with a person with whom we didn't want to. For Stokowski, however, these experiences are not part of discovering one's sexuality, but criminal offences, and not just any criminal offence, but a serious criminal offence for which you should end up in prison for up to 10 years. And not because she has any legal argument or case to make for this, or is some criminologist with expertise in sex crimes. No, but because her feminist bullshit, according to her, gives her the authority to dictate to you what sex is and what is not, how you should have sex and how not, and that you have to order your sex life on her guidelines of a strict, systematic, bureaucratic order, so that you can ensure by Stokowski's grace that nothing would ever in any possible way go wrong, and so nothing could ever potentially in any way happen that might be uncomfortable, or at least what she would deem to be uncomfortable. Yes, my dear, let me quickly go check the list of approved sexual procedure. According to it, we shall now continue with oral sex and anal sex in an alphabetical order. How fucking hot is that? Assaults at city council party. Every year, 18-year-olds are invited to visit the Munich city council to celebrate where politics and administration is usually done. This time there were 2 assaults on young women by refugees. The city wants to introduce measures ensuring this won't happen again. It is interesting that this made it into the news anyway. I believe this is mainly due to the fact that it happened in the city council building and not somewhere else. If you have been subscribed to my channel for a longer time, you will probably already know this map. It's created by the Twitter account XY Einzelfall, which takes confirmed cases of migrant crimes, creates a dot and puts it onto the map where the crime occurred. The year is coming to a close, and besides the increased security measures in Cologne, this will also mean that the German crime statistics will soon be published. It will be interesting to see if the fears many of us have had are confirmed within those statistics. We can now already almost be certain that there will be an increase in sexual assaults for the year of 2016. It will be very important to not let the same people who claimed that German men are apparently worse or just as bad take over the debate once the crime statistics are published or when more such crimes take place. If we allow the debate to be hijacked like this rather than having an honest debate about how Islam views women and treats women, then we can be rather certain that there will be another increase in crime for the upcoming year. And now for Slovakia, where the government passed a bill which bans Islam from being officially recognized as a religion. Throughout all of Eastern Europe, there has been staunch opposition to Muslim immigration since the refugee and migrant crisis, and I would argue even since before. Over the course of the past 50 years, Eastern Europe was in a great position to just sit back and watch the catastrophe which was Islamic immigration into Western Europe unfold and observe the resulting parallel societies. And I can't blame them for not wanting to deal with the terror attacks, a parallel justice system, a parallel society, and the hostile attitudes that these Muslim communities have. Especially when considering that we ourselves haven't found a solution to this Islamic problem and are ourselves unwilling to even just confront it. As long as we don't confront the Islamic problem ourselves, Western Europe has no right to lecture Eastern Europe on Islamic immigration, let alone to try and push it onto them. But this step taken here by the Slovakian government is one that I can't approve of. It seems to be somewhat of a right-wing virtue signal towards voters and neighbours. Eastern Europe has already made it very clear that it will not be taking any Islamic migrants, and their borders have also already been shut. This law, in my opinion, is also dangerous, since it threatens the separation of religion and state. I believe many forget that secularism isn't just about not allowing religious dogma to influence the lawmakers, but also about not allowing the lawmakers to meddle within the religious affairs of citizens. So this law isn't just pointless, but also dangerous. This law, to me, just shows how democratic principles of the middle are consistently undermined by the fringes, including not just the far left, but also the far right. Now let's talk about the French elections, since we had 2 big developments in France over the last week. François Hollande will not seek out a second term as president. Many of you will think that this will have to do with the past terror attacks, but considering how well his administration dealt with security issues, I believe it is more likely that it has to do with the economic difficulties under which France has been suffering for years. I have to honestly say that I respect this decision. His poll numbers were in the cellar, and he must have known that his chances of winning the re-election were low, even though his prime minister also kept pushing him to not run again. So yes, it is respectable that he chose not to seek a second term rather than taking his party down with him. I honestly have to say that I was hoping for this, not because I dislike Hollande, but because I like Manuel Valls, and I hope Valls will now seek the presidential nomination. Manuel Valls' economic policies aren't the most sympathetic, but to my knowledge he is the only left-leaning politician in a European country with some kind of influence who has confronted Islam, the only one who has also publicly very clearly talked about Islam's undemocratic, totalitarian and inhumane tendencies, and how Islam has to bend its knee to European values and not be cuddled around with. For me as a left-leaning liberal, this is music to my ears. It is something I've been waiting for years. It is something that the European left has needed for years, if not even decades. In France, it took hundreds of people killed, inner-city violence, anti-gay crimes, and anti-Semitic riots that remind one of Germany during the 1930s to finally make the left realize that Islam is not some lovely little minority that, through the virtue of being foreign, deserves to be cuddled, but that it is a undemocratic, death cult that has to be confronted. From the starting point, it is my hope that from France we could see a revitalization of democratic principles and left-wing values, which could then spread throughout Europe and finally lead to the left confronting Islam, which is the biggest threat to European societies. But I believe this will not happen, for two reasons. For one, the French left is very much divided and arguing amongst itself, and second, there has been another important development in French politics. That is that Sarkozy was rejected by the French conservatives, who decided to pick François Fillon for the presidential race. The French conservatives through this proved to still have some sense left in them, since Sarkozy would have without a doubt been a losing candidate. In contrast to Sarkozy, Fillon is more of a Gaullist. Gaullism is a conservative political movement originating out of 1950s and 1940s France, which strives to rebuild France's international reputation and power. Socially conservative, centralist, and very much about protecting French sovereignty. These values are also very much reflected within Fillon's campaign. EU skeptic, wanting to restore France's international reputation, confrontative towards what he calls totalitarian Islam, as well as an emphasis on conservative family values and suggestions over the economic liberalization of France. Fillon, through such a program, is also capable of taking votes from the Front National, whose economic programs are more protectionist, and I would guess that many French people, especially because of the economic difficulties their country has endured over the past years of protectionist economic policies, would welcome an economic alternative. So for now, I guess what will happen is that the French left argues itself into unelectability, and Fillon will take enough votes from Le Pen to win the race.